So what do we do now that we know that inflammation is associated with mental illness? And as you mentioned, also with mental health, what do we do? So you may think, oh, you know what? Anti-inflammatories. Anti-inflammatories is a great way to go about it. And you would say, well, yes, and not really. But case in point, Celebrex is a drug that is often given to patients with depression. And this is actually an anti-inflammatory drug. So, it's the right direction, but it's too simplistic. And what I like to say is too linear. Inflammation related to depression. So let's give you an anti-inflammatory. And for some people it works. And some people, they never get rid of their symptoms and they're kind of stuck. But the truth is that a better way of looking at mental health can be thought as a web. Many things go wrong. There's no one thing. Maybe one thing is the driving force. And so then there's everything is tangled up. It's like a web. So in order to recover health and create optimal health is to unravel the web. The web is different for everybody. There's no web same for everybody, just like there's this drugs for this and no matter the person, but it's very distinct. We all have different webs of mental illness. And that is a very, very important concept because that is what is going to drive what we do to help people to get their health back.
Yeah, for sure. Like one person's root cause might be that they're living in a moldy home that's driving up inflammation. Another person may not be living in a moldy home, but they have gut dysbiosis. They have maybe small intestinal bacterial overgrowth that's causing them not to be able to absorb key nutrients, driving up more inflammation in their gut. That's affecting all systems of their body. Another person may have maybe been abused as a child and hasn't been able to work through that, right? So there's certain root cause factors that, it's usually a combination of root causes, but there can be one or two that are just a higher priority, right? That are driving this.
Exactly. And the body is so wonderfully designed that it has so many ways of compensating. When you see dysfunction or illness, is because the body is no longer capable of compensating. And so in natural medicine, we believe that the body was created with a lot of wisdom and innate ability to heal itself. We believe that when you remove what is blocking the body from healing and give the body what it needs, then the body's able to heal itself. So how do we unravel this mental health situation? We know that the brain and mental health are negatively impacted by inflammation. We already established that. And one way of unraveling the web of mental health and brain health is to find the source or sources of inflammation. This is super duper powerful. So powerful. So the next question is, where is the inflammation? Where is it coming from? And like you mentioned, and I mentioned too, the web is different for every individual suffering from poor mental health or brain health. And understanding this is key in order to address each unique person's source of inflammation. Now, the sources of inflammation are vast. So I'm going to give you some, and I classify them in categories, but by no means is this an exhaustive list of, by any means at all. You mentioned trauma. So one is psychological sources, trauma, poor interpersonal relationships, lack of community, lack of purpose, negative thinking. And we mentioned this already with the little doggy making a path,
Yeah.
So another one is life factors, such as poor diet, like the American Standard Diet, or also known in the nutrition community as the SAD diet, no pun intended.
Yep.
Lack of exercise, high stress, poor sleep. You also mentioned sleep, not enough sun exposure. I mean, for mental health and for everything, we need vitamin D. not enough, poor hydration. So these are just examples of life factors that they kind of stack up. Everything is stacking up, or it makes a web of things. Now, you also mentioned pathogens. Toxic overload is huge. Some people that suffer from mental illness have some kind of pathogens like mold, you mentioned, herpes, candida, overgrowth. All of these are factors. Environmental toxins such as smoke, BPAs, glyphosate. Now, glyphosate is becoming huge nowadays. Heavy metals like mercury, lead, arsenic, and so on. Now, genetic factors are also a factor. And we all heard, like we mentioned before, that mental and brain issues run in families. However, we need to take into account that families also live in similar environments and tend to have similar lifestyles. So it's, you got to untangle that. That said, there's certain SNPs or genetic variations that are likely to predispose someone to develop mental illness or poor brain health. Examples of these are the MTHFR, and without getting into a lot of detail, the MTHFR SNP impacts detoxification, neurotransmitter production, and hormones. Another SNP, the SNP, predisposes individuals to excessive worry or anxiety. Now, please remember that genes or genetics are not your destiny. They're not your destiny. They're only what is possible. And you're able to turn on and off genes with lifestyle and environmental variables. Okay? Now, hormonal imbalances. This is huge in mental illness as well. Things like thyroid, cortisol, melatonin. And lastly, I like to mention one that is many times dismissed: concussions or brain injury. A lot of people, I see a lot of clients that, they have worked with many other practitioners, and they did wonderful testing, this and that and the other, but they're still feeling not well. Well, it turns out they have a history of concussion or brain injury. So we need to address the brain specifically. And so I always look for this variable in clients when I'm working with. So here are the most important risk factors for mental health.